I'd like to put my first question to our guest in New York. Caleb, first of all, as someone who's engaged in the Occupy protest movement, tell us about the National Day of Action to shut down the corporations. What is exactly the aim of this action?
Well, I would just put it this way. Occupy Wall Street is an expression of the fact that most people in this country are fully aware of the fact that this idea that this is a democratic country is false. The bankers and the corporations have the power, and we, the people, who supposedly are supposed to rule in a democratic society, don't have the power. The power belongs to those with the wealth, and we, the 99%, are tired of that, and we're pouring out into the streets, we're demanding this change, and we're putting our bodies on the line to challenge that. And in the process, many of us are learning for the first time that the 1% has always ruled this country. All this rhetoric about democracy is false. And the only way we can bring a real democracy into being is through being in the streets, through challenging their power and demanding our right to jobs, education, health care, and all the things that human beings are entitled to, that this system takes away from people, because in capitalism, people only can survive if they're able to sell their labor to a capitalist. And what we're saying is that that form of existence is degrading, and it's not necessary. People should have the right to jobs and education, and we're going to demonstrate and demand that they get it.
We're seeing here, our guests in Philadelphia and Idaho saying that they should disrupt the system, that they should do something that will count. Do you think that that is possible? What can these protesters do that would count and that would lead them forward? Because we know, of course, how strong the corporations are. We know, of course, how strong and protected, as our guest was saying, Wall Street is. So what can these protesters do to actually count?
In the short term, if we wish to win concessions and force the ruling elite to concede and stop doing some of the horrific things they're doing, like destroying the environment or laying people off, you have to hit their profits. The fact that they continue to rake in profits as suffering continues allows them to continue it. But when their profits are affected, that's one short-term victories can be won in the short term by affecting their profits. But in the long run, we have to realize that all the problems that Occupy Wall Street has raised, whether it's destruction of the environment, mass layoffs, the rising prices of education, unemployment, they're all rooted in the fact that we have a system where profits are the determiner of what goes on in the economy. We have a very collective society. People come together to build buildings, people come together to teach schools, people come together and collectively do all kinds of things. But the products they create collectively end up belonging to a small 1%, and they own the products that we come together and create. And ultimately, if we're going to change these horrors, we need to cease that. That needs to end, and people need to be able to collectively share in the products that they collectively produce.
Right. When we are looking at the aims that we've been hearing of against the Occupy demonstrators, they've been complaining about the brutal police crackdowns, the near-lethal force that's been used against them, the indiscriminate use, they say, of weapons like pepper gas, tear gas. Why are we, first of all, seeing this? Would you say that this is just a singular instance of police action to stop protesters, for instance, from occupying a space that they shouldn't legally? Or is this more about a systematic approach in the way that the government has chosen to deal with the Occupy demonstrators?
It's not just the Occupy demonstrators who've been subject to this kind of terror and repression by the parasitical class that runs this country, those who own the banks, the factories, the corporations, and ultimately the government as a result. It's a continued pattern that has gone on. The FBI sent death threats to Martin Luther King. There was a repeated campaign to destroy the Black Panther Party. Back when the unions were militant and revolutionary in the 1930s, there was campaigns against things like the Trade Union Unity League, where FBI terror was used against them. The 1% has always owned this government. The Founding Fathers, those were the plantation owners and the wealthy people that ran the government from the beginning, and they continue to do so. And the glorious thing about Occupy Wall Street is that people are realizing that the problem isn't one politician or other. The problem is that a parasitical class of rulers who exploits the labor of not just people in this country but all over the world and continues to get rich off of the work that all of us do they're the problem, and that the only way to change things is to confront them, to be in the streets, and to make clear that their business as usual cannot continue as long as people are suffering. And we will be out there in huge numbers, and ultimately we need to fight to get to the point where they're no longer in control, and that these banks and these factories, which we all have created, can come into common ownership. You know, that's ultimately what we have to fight for.
The way that the regime is cracking down on the protests, do you think that the demands of the protesters is going to be realistic demands, and that are they going to be able to bring about those changes, at least in the near future?
They absolutely will be able to win their demands. It may take a long time, but it will happen. History is like a train, and you can't stop a train as it speeds forward. And history, the age of the empires and of profiteers and of capitalists is over, and the people of the world are as one rising up against them. And it may take a long time to ultimately win, but this system cannot continue to operate the way it is. People are in a state of revolt all throughout the United States for the first time in a generation, and it's just the beginning. If you think 2011 was great, 2012 is going to be even better.
Caleb Maupin with the International Action Centre joining us there live.